It was one of those nights where the darkness felt thicker, like it was pressing against the windows, trying to get in. I had just finished a late shift at the diner, and my coworker, Darren, offered me a ride home. Darren was a weird dude, always staring a bit too long, laughing at things that weren't funny. I only accepted the ride because my car was in the shop and the night was bitingly cold. The drive was quiet, the kind of silence that's loud, you know? As we pulled up to my place, Darren's hand found its way to my knee. I brushed it off with a firm no thanks, and his face twisted into something ugly. He mumbled something under his breath and sped off, leaving a cloud of exhaust and a knot of worry in my stomach. Once inside, I double-checked the locks and made myself a cup of tea, trying to shake off the creepiness from Darren's car. I was about to head to bed when I heard it. A soft tap, tap, tap on the window. I froze, listening. It was probably just a branch or something, right? I told myself to ignore it, but the tapping continued, persistent. I inched toward the window and peeked through the blinds. Nothing but my own reflection, stared back. I let out the breath I'd been holding and turned away, only to jump out of my skin as I saw the cherry of a cigarette glow in the dark. It was right outside my living room window, bobbing slightly as if held in someone's lips. My heart felt like it was trying to beat its way out of my chest. Darren was a smoker. That much I knew. I watched, paralyzed, as the cherry brightened with each inhale, a sinister red eye in the night. I ducked away from the window, fumbling for my phone. Where had I put it? My breath caught in my throat as the tapping escalated into a sudden, violent hailstorm of stones, pelting the window. Each thud against the glass was like a drumbeat of dread, resonating through the silent house. I could almost feel the malice in each impact, a wordless threat shattering the fragile peace of my living room. And then the doorknob began to rattle, a harsh, grating sound that sent spikes of fear lancing through me. It wasn't just a casual try. It was an aggressive, desperate jiggle, as if the person on the other side was frantic to get in. My safe haven suddenly felt like a trap, the walls too thin, the doors too flimsy. I scuttled on all fours to the kitchen, the cold tile against my palms grounding me to the moment. My hands were quivering uncontrollably as I snatched my phone from the counter, the screen a blur of light in the darkness. I punched in the numbers 911 with trembling fingers, each press a desperate plea for help. The doorknob's jiggling was a sinister soundtrack to my panic, a reminder that danger was just a twist away. Clutching the phone with a white-knuckled grip, I hunkered down in the darkest corner of the kitchen, the dispatcher's steady voice in my ear, promising that help was on its way. The relentless jiggling of the doorknob ceased abruptly, plunging the room into a heavy silence that seemed to press against my ears. I strained to listen, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm. In a sudden burst of courage, or perhaps it was sheer terror, I found my voice and screamed, "The police are coming." My declaration shattered the silence like a glass dropped on a tile floor. A shadow passed in front of the kitchen window, and I held my breath. The cherry of the cigarette appeared again, a mocking signal of the watcher's presence. I could hear my own heartbeat over the dispatcher's assurances. And then, as suddenly as it had begun, the cherry disappeared. Footsteps clambered away from the door, retreating hastily into the night, and I was left clinging to the fragile hope that my words had banished the threat into the shadows from whence it came. It was the longest 20 minutes of my life, each second stretching into an eternity of waiting and listening for any sign of return. When the police finally arrived, the night had reclaimed its stillness, and the stalker had vanished like a ghost into the darkness. They scoured the area and found a scattering of cigarette butts just outside my window, a tangible trace of the unseen terror that had lurked there. Nervously, I recounted the night's harrowing events to the officers, my voice barely above a whisper, my hands still quivering with the aftershocks of fear. The memory of the cigarette's intermittent glow was seared into my retinas, a haunting beacon of the watcher's presence. Sleep became a stranger in the nights that followed. Shadows morphed into sinister figures, and every little noise seemed like a harbinger of another visit. I reported Darren to our manager, and he didn't show up to work again. But the absence of his brooding figure did nothing to quell the dread that lingered. Despite never seeing him again, in the deepest dark of some restless nights, I catch myself scanning the gloom outside my window, half expecting to see those hungry, waiting eyes and the ominous flicker of a cigarette's ember ready to reignite my fear. Moving to a new city and starting fresh, was supposed to be an adventure, an exciting turn of the page. I had just landed a job that felt like the break of a lifetime, and to celebrate, I splurged on a quaint little house on the outskirts of town. My very own slice of suburbia, complete with a white picket fence and a sprawling oak tree in the front yard. It was a far cry from the cramped apartment I'd left behind. I decided to start anew with everything, including my home phone and internet setup. My old provider was a nightmare of dropped calls and sluggish connections, so I went all out with a local company that promised crystal clear calls and lightning-fast speeds. The day I moved in, the technician handed me a slip of paper with my new number. A fresh start, no strings attached. Or so I thought. It didn't take long for the calls to start. At first, it was just a mild annoyance. People asking to schedule appointments with Dr. Keller, a psychiatrist who apparently had my number before me. I'd politely inform them of the mix-up and go about my day. But the calls kept coming, and I started to wonder about this mysterious doctor and the lives he'd touched. Then one night, as the clock's hands joined at 12, the phone rang, shattering the silence of my half-unpacked living room. I hesitated, the shrill sound echoing in the empty space. Curiosity got the better of me, and I answered. Dr. Keller's office. The voice on the other end was frantic, breathless. "I need to see him. It's urgent. I might do something terrible if I don't get help." I cleared my throat, the chill of unease creeping up my spine. "I'm sorry, but you have the wrong number. Dr. Keller is no longer at this." "No, you don't understand," the voice interrupted, a manic edge to their tone. "I can't stop the thoughts. They're in every corner of my mind, whispering, screaming." I felt a pang of sympathy, tempered by a growing sense of alarm. "Listen, I can help you find the right number for Dr. Keller, or maybe there's another professional I can." "I'm in your house," the voice cut in, so sudden and so sure that I froze. "I'm here, in the dark, watching you." My heart hammered against my rib cage, threatening to burst. This had to be someone's twisted idea of a prank. There was no way they could be inside. I'd done a thorough sweep before bed, checking each lock with meticulous care. Yet the certainty in their voice gnawed at me, a worm of doubt burrowing deep. "Who are you?" I managed to choke out, my voice a cocktail of fear and disbelief. A chuckle seeped through the receiver, low and unhinged. "I know about the loose floorboard in the hallway," the caller whispered, "and the photo of a beach at sunset on your fridge. The way your living room walls are that odd shade of green that's supposed to be calming." My blood ran cold. Those details were accurate. Unnervingly so. The floorboard was a discovery I'd made just that morning, and the photo was a memento from a family vacation years ago. Even the paint. How could they know about the paint I'd chosen just last week, thinking it would make this new, empty house feel like home? "Impossible," I breathed, my voice barely a whisper. The room felt like it was closing in on me, the darkness suddenly alive with 1,000 unseen eyes. "You can't be here." But the line was dead, leaving me with nothing but the echo of that eerie laughter and a silence that was far too loud. My sanctuary had been infiltrated by a voice that knew too much. A midnight caller who had somehow pierced the veil of my privacy with a few well-chosen words. I dropped the phone, my eyes darting to the shadows that clung to the corners of the room. The house suddenly felt too big, too full of dark nooks and hidden crannies. With shaking hands, I picked up the phone and dialed the police, reporting the call and trying to convince myself that it was just someone's idea of a twisted prank. But as I waited for the officers to arrive, every creak of the settling house, every rustle of leaves outside, felt like the approach of something sinister. The police found nothing, of course. They suggested I change my number, maybe get a security system installed for peace of mind. They left and I was alone again, the weight of their skepticism almost as heavy as my fear. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat up, listening to the house breathe around me. Every time I closed my eyes, I'd see the phone's receiver. Imagine it ringing, that voice spilling out more threats, more chilling declarations of proximity. Morning came, and with it, a rational frame of mind. It was just a prank, I told myself. Some disturbed person got lucky with their guess, tried to scare me, and succeeded. But as the sun set again, and the shadows grew long, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. I still jump when the phone rings, even though I've changed the number twice. Sometimes in the dead of night, I wonder if the caller was in the house, if they were just outside, or if it was all in my head. But every so often, when the wind is just right, I swear I can hear a whisper, a manic giggle from somewhere inside these walls, and I can't help but ask myself, was it really just a guess? I've always been a night owl, the kind of person who finds solace in the hush that falls over the world when everyone else is asleep. But that was before that night, the night when silence became my enemy and the darkness something alive, something hunting me. It started as a typical Tuesday, with me leaving the office well after everyone else had gone home. The streets were deserted, the only sound my own footsteps echoing off the high-rise buildings as I made my way to the subway. There's a rhythm to the city at night, a heartbeat you can feel if you're alone enough. And I was in sync with it, or so I thought. As I descended into the subway station, a chill that had nothing to do with the night air crept up my spine. I shrugged it off, convincing myself it was just the isolation playing tricks on me. The platform was empty, the fluorescent lights flickering in a half-hearted dance above. I checked the time on my phone, just 3 minutes until the next train. That's when I heard it, the sound of footsteps, a mirror of my own, but slightly offbeat. I glanced over my shoulder, expecting to see another late-night commuter, but the platform was still empty. I turned back, unease curling in my gut. The footsteps stopped as mine did. A coincidence, I told myself. The train couldn't come soon enough. I boarded the empty car, the doors sliding shut with a sense of finality. As the train lurched forward, I settled into a seat, trying to shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. The lights flickered once, twice, and in that fraction of a second of darkness, I saw a reflection in the window, someone standing in the car's connecting section. I whipped around, my heart in my throat, but there was no one there, just empty seats and stale air. I laughed nervously at my own paranoia. It was just my reflection, distorted by the juddering of the train. I tried to focus on my phone, on anything other than the nagging fear, but then the train plunged into a tunnel, and the car was enveloped in a roaring darkness. When we emerged, I dared another glance at the window. There it was again, a shadowy figure, just a smear of darkness, but unmistakably human-shaped. This time, I didn't look back. I didn't want to confirm my growing terror. I just stared at that dark shape, willing it to be a trick of the light. But as I watched, it moved, a deliberate creeping motion, and my breath hitched. The train screeched to a halt at my stop, and I bolted out the doors, not even waiting for them to fully open. I didn't look back. I couldn't. The station was as empty as the last, and I took the stairs 2 at a time, desperate to get to the safety of the street. Gulping down the fear that threatened to choke me, I told myself it was all a product of my overactive imagination. A shadow, a reflection from the train window, nothing tangible. But as I emerged into the night air, the unmistakable sound of footsteps echoed behind me, a persistent tap that matched my own accelerating pace. I spun around, my heart slamming against my ribcage, and that's when I saw it, a figure, distant but undeniably real, obscured by the dim streetlights. The figure was tall, broad-shouldered, and exuded an air of menace that sent a shiver down my spine. They halted the moment I turned, as if we were in some twisted game of statues, and I could swear I caught the faintest glint of metal in their hand, a reflection that screamed danger. Panic took over, and I bolted, the rhythmic pounding of my shoes on the pavement a desperate drumbeat urging me to safety. I didn't dare to look back until I was on my doorstep, fumbling with my keys. A quick glance over my shoulder revealed the quiet street, the figure now gone, leaving me to question if they had been a figment of my fear. I burst through my front door, locking it behind me with trembling hands. I leaned against the solid wood, trying to steady my ragged breathing, to convince myself that I was safe within the confines of my own home. The darkness inside felt oppressive, alive with unseen threats. I reached out for the light switch, my fingers brushing the cold plastic, when I heard it, the unmistakable sound of footsteps, this time undeniably inside my house. I froze, every instinct screaming that I was not alone in the dark. But as I stood there, paralyzed, the footsteps ceased, leaving a silence so complete it roared in my ears. I searched the house, turning on every light, but found nothing amiss. No signs of forced entry, no disturbances, nothing to validate the terror that clung to me like a second skin. I spent the night wide awake, every shadow a hiding place, every noise a signal of lurking danger. By the first light of dawn, I had almost convinced myself it had all been the hallucinations of an overworked, overtired mind. Yet, in the dead of night, When the world falls silent and darkness becomes my unwelcome companion, I hear it. The echo of footsteps, a constant reminder of my unseen follower. And sometimes, in the darkest corner of my fear, I wonder if next time, the glint of metal won't just be a trick of a light,